All right, so I'm just trying something new. I got some new equipment I want to try out, and then I want to talk about the case today because it was such a crazy day one of the trial. So, hey, Angie, I'm trying something new. So, I got some graphics and other things, but really just want to get on the trial today. It started out pretty crazy. I'm assuming most of you know the what's going on. Amber Guyger, 30, killed Botham John, 26 years old. Um, he was killed in his own apartment, just sitting there, right? So today the trial started, and it started off with a bang this morning. The judge had to admonish a reporter for whose laptop went off. Then after that, the trial really got underway with the opening arguments. The defense made a couple motions, called for a mistrial because John Cruzo, the Dallas County DA, made a video, had an interview last night. If anybody has any questions or anything, I'm kind of just spitballing here. So if you have any questions, I want to, feel free to direct them to me. So Cruzo made his interview on Fox 4 last night. The defense asked for a motion for a mistrial. The judge considered that and ultimately overruled that motion or did not go from that. So fast forward to the opening statements, right? I think they were pretty much on point with what I would expect. Oh, good. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm trying out some new. Thank you. I'm trying out some new stuff. So this is just the first night of me doing this, and hopefully we'll get more there. But so what we have is the trial opening. The prosecution starts stating their case, and I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it sounds to me like they're banking on reasoning to be their defense, or their not their defense, but their objective. So basically, what they're saying is Amber Guyger was able to work all day. She didn't do anything special. She went to assist the SWAT team in arresting a couple of people and took them back to jail, kind of sat around, did a couple reports, and spent most of the day texting her boyfriend, who's her actual partner as well. And about, they were texting, probably sending pictures. It was pretty crazy and provocative what was going on throughout her day. So she was having a pretty normal day and was not as exhausted as or we've been led to believe. She was texting him starting at, let's say, 5 minutes to 6 on that day, and then all throughout 8 p.m. when he had to leave, and then actually until she got home and went up to the wrong floor about 9:55. So after that, they also tried to. So basically, the point was establishing her mindset. She was not crazy. She was not super exhausted. She was able to sext her boyfriend/partner. She was able to go home. She was able to pull over to the side and talk to her partner on the phone. Which, interesting topic. I should go ahead and tell you something that's to bombshell here. Her partner, Martin Rivera, actually killed a man in Pleasant Grove in 2007. And it's really not relevant to the case, but it's not irony. It's kind of a sick irony that Amber Guyger was riding with the man for 6 months, 8 months, had a sexual, physical relationship with him. This man, who also is a police officer, who killed an unarmed black man back in 2004. So that's a little side road, but just to be clear that her boyfriend, Martin Rivera, her partner, has actually killed someone as well. So side road. That didn't get brought up by the prosecution, but I found that out courtesy of Tiffany Billions. So shout out to her, and just want to make sure I share that with you guys. All right, so back to the opening statements from the prosecution. So prosecution harps on the her state of mind, her training. She was physically fit. She did not work that long. The idea that she had been working so many hours and was so discombobulated after a long day's work, was pretty standard for the CR team, the criminal response team, I believe is the name of that team. So pretty standard for that, right? So, and they asked her partner, Officer Rivera, were you able to, and this is in cross-examination, but they asked him, were you able to complete all of your duties? Were you able to leave early that day? Were you able to go to a meeting? He did 3 or 4 different things, including sexting her, making plans to see her without any issue. So that's pretty logical, and I think they're putting the burden on the jury to play the reason test, right? Is it reasonable that someone would go to work all day, no matter how tired they are, especially if they're a trained officer, and then shoot someone because they walked in the wrong house? So that's the main crux of it. It's not reasonable. And they also alluded to the fact that something must have happened in the conversation she was having with her boyfriend / partner, Martin Rivera. There must have been something going on in that case, because something changed before she went into the apartment that led her to not have her faculties about her despite driving home and doing all the functions that she had. They also made it clear that she was not wearing or did not use her radio to communicate to anyone, hey, I'm under duress, I'm being attacked, there's someone in my apartment. Standard things that you would do as a trained police officer, which she did not do. So so that's kind of it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, if I'm leaving something out, please let me know. I'm kind of running through this by memory a bit. So then we'll fast forward to the the defense and their opening statement. Obviously, their opening statement is to paint her as a professional, someone who is well qualified and encountered someone in her home. They're treating it as a burglary. That she, I believe defense attorneys that I've heard say it's a mistake of fact, I think is the term, that she was mistaken about where she was, so she's justified in shooting him because he was an intruder in her apartment. Now that's extremely unreasonable, but if it certainly lends itself more toward a case that is not murder, it lends itself more towards a case that is probably a lesser charge. I see I'm losing some people. If you have any questions or if I'm kind of all over the place, just let me know here. So, but that's what they're going towards, that she was justified. It seems more like the kind of George Zimmerman and all of these previous cases where, hey, I'm scared and then I shoot. Despite my police training and despite should be having the ability to make a sound decision at the moment she's encountered by this strange person, even though she's not in his apartment. So I'm going to go kind of back and forth here because that reminds me of the prosecution stating that she didn't notice the red mat at the door. She didn't notice the smell of marijuana because both of them was smoking weed, with no problem, but they wanted to address that up front. So, she didn't notice the wafting smell of marijuana as a trained police officer, didn't notice the red mat. The defense said that the numbers for the apartment, the door, were not on the door, that they are lit above, and she just made a mistake. So basically what it gets down to is what I thought it was going to be and how reasonable the jury is, right? What do they believe? She worked 40 hours Monday through Thursday, right? Only 40 hours, so that's 10 hours a day. That's nothing extravagant. So I don't know how they can say that she was so tired and she met this intruder and didn't know what to do. All right, so let me fast forward past the opening arguments. That was the main crux of it, though, that she's a trained professional and that she was scared and an intruder was in her home. So moving past that, there were motions to whether or not Botham Jean's mother and sister could be in the courtroom, which was allowed. His mother can be in the courtroom. His sister, Miss Finley, there was a lot of consternation about that because she was going to testify. She, in fact, was the first witness from the prosecution, and she spoke about her brother She spoke about him, obviously glowingly, what she remembered of their childhood. She told some good stories and just laid some foundation about the kind of person Botham Jean was. He was an accountant. He was smart. He was a lover of Christ, and just a good person who did not deserve to be shot, no matter the police officer's state of mind at the time. And that's what was a lot of time was spent going over allowing the text messages between her and Rivera, text messages between Guyger and other family members, to be able to establish the authenticity of what she said in specific moments, what she said right after shooting Botham Jean, what she did. She started texting her boyfriend immediately. I keep saying boyfriend, Martin Rivera, her partner / lover, whatever. She started texting him immediately when it happened. She texted him shortly after 10 saying, hey, you know, how close are you, or are you on your way? And his initial thought was he was going over there to hook up with her because that was the initial plan. So Martin Rivera and her conversations with him are critical because they show initial, not intent, but context, right? How she handled everything that happened when it happened. It's known that she was definitely going to link up with him. So so they have Botham Jean's sister come up first. She speaks. The defense decides not to cross-examine her. They pass the witness, and they also decide not to make any more motions or to drop their motions regarding her being able to remain in the courtroom. So she can remain in the courtroom for the remainder of the trial. Oh, excuse me. All right, sorry about that. Let's see. Okay, I'm kind of going fast here. Hopefully you guys are getting all this. The next witness, oh, you see how my screen is messed up? So sorry that my head is half off the screen and so my arms, I'll have to fix all that. But anyway, so next thing's up, the Sergeant Watson, who is over the CRT unit that Rivera and Guyger were both members of. So Sergeant Watson was the second witness, clearly called by the defense to establish standard operating procedures for Dallas police and to establish the qualifications of Amber Guyger, why they chose her for this unit that she was in, and you know how that day went and what normal responsibilities were. So Sergeant Watson pretty much followed company line, what you would expect. He spoke on her. Why they chose her, said she was fit, and said that, in a nutshell, that when you are a Dallas police officer, especially when you're in the city of Dallas, but it came out that in general, when you are a Dallas police officer, you are always on duty. So the idea that she is this tired and weary, confused, off-duty police officer doesn't really hold a lot of water or weight, considering that that's what they all do. That's what they're trained to do. And she did nothing extravagant throughout that day. That CRT team was assisting the SWAT team with apprehending some robbery suspects that they had initial interactions with. So again, she did nothing exceptional that day. There was another fun-filled moment and a eventual bench conference when there was talk of the Sergeant Watson being cross-examined by the prosecutor, and getting to the point that Guyger did not follow standard operating procedures and administrative policies when it comes to using her radio and calling for backup before she shot Mr. Jean, thinking he was an intruder or whatever. Because again, that's what we're really talking about here. Intruder and how someone is supposed to react and the basis for their reaction. So the consternation was over whether or not she followed procedure and how that lies. So they had the jury leave the office. Excuse me, they had the jury leave. Jury came back in, and ultimately they were able to proceed. And so basically, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Oh, someone asked me questions. Let's see. I might have missed it down here. Hold on. Okay. All right. Haven't missed any questions as of yet, I don't think. But what I'm getting at in a nutshell here, the defense is logical. Hey, she was scared and she shot this man. Now, obviously, the prosecution says, so what? You're a trained professional. You have so many remedies to not have to shoot someone. And why didn't you offer any aid when you shot him instead of worry about yourself and texting your boyfriend and wanting, your supervisor's information? She was way more worried about self-preservation in that moment than preserving his life. There was a lot of talk about her radio being attached or not being attached and why she didn't use it. Did she have it? Was it charged? Man, I keep getting cut off here. I got to work on the screen. All right. But so, and a lot of talk was established about are there charging stations at main headquarters where she was all day? So she could have been able to charge her radio, and there was no excuse for her not to radio. Let's see. The third witness that took the stand today is Martin Rivera. Now, obviously, that's where the action was because these two had a sexual relationship, which, again, is only important because it shows state of mind and gives the context for what she was doing. So basically, if you're able to, for lack of a better term, try to get some booty all day from your man, and as up to the point that you are parking your car, then you should be able to make a reasoned decision when you enter the wrong apartment that doesn't involve you shooting and killing someone. She shot Botham Jean center mass, as a police officer is trained to do. She used no de-escalation techniques. I believe the prosecutor, let me find the direct quote here. Let's see. 1 second while I try to find the direct quote from the prosecutor. All right, so this is what happens. Okay, here's what he said. He said, no opportunity for de-escalation, no opportunity for him, meaning Botham Jean, to surrender. Bang, bang, double tap. And we all know what that means, okay? Bang, bang, double tap. That's what she did to that unarmed man sitting in his home. And there's no justification for that. He made the point that Officer Rivera left the office that day, or left the job, and was able to go to a Boy Scout meeting, was able to go to the gym, was able to do all of these things, and had worked the same amount of overtime. Overtime, by the way, which is what police do. I mean, I'm sure there might be some police watching this. You have police friends. I do. Cops work a lot of OT. They work a lot of off-duty jobs. So the idea that, oh my gosh, she had worked so many hours, a 13-hour shift, and that her shift, by the way, was 8 to 4 normally. So the idea that she worked so many hours, I mean, we know that that doesn't hold any water. But that will continue to be the defense's play, I'm sure. So let's see. Where do we go from here? So Officer Rivera on the stand. We have more talk about his day, their relationship. He did confirm that they had a relationship that continued through September 6th, the day that Jean was murdered or was killed by Amber Guyger. Despite the despite the defense saying that they did not have a relationship, and that was a pretty telling moment when he did confirm that the defense was incorrect with that. One thing I haven't mentioned yet that is important is that the deleting of text messages. Some folks have said that this police officer clearly broke the law. Why hasn't he been charged or indicted for breaking the law and deleting evidence? As did she being Guyger. They deleted several text messages. Snapchat was one of their primary forms of sending photos, and text messaging. All right, okay, let's see. James said, I'm proving that she was distracted. Okay, so I'm going to respond to James De La Garza's comment right here because I don't know if he's still here or what he's talking about, but he's saying that I guess you guys can see his comment. So I'm not talking about race yet in this thing, so I don't know who this message is related to, James. But anyway, I'm speaking on the facts as I heard them. So if you want to argue manslaughter versus murder, we can certainly do that. But that's not really what we're talking about here. I'm talking about the day and the events that went on. She was her being distracted does not justify her shooting someone. If someone were to come into her home and she were to murder them and shoot them and kill them, you might have that justification. But I don't think you do in this case. So sorry to go off on that tangent. I wanted to respond directly to that because oftentimes people want to bring up the race card. But I assure you, if this was a black cop, I'd be having the same conversation because my contention is that the police kill too many people. Doesn't matter what the race is. Now, surely if you live in this country, you know that they kill a disproportionate number of black men and women that they come in contact with. Case in point, her partner that she rides with every day killed an unarmed black man in 2007 when he was a 4-year veteran. Amy Wilburn was fired by DPD for shooting Kelvion Walker, who was unarmed, in 2014. So the idea that the race card is being played here, I think, is ridiculous. Cops kill too many people. Too many excuses are made for when they kill people. So she needs to be held accountable, and murder is the appropriate charge. You include lesser charges just in case, right, for insurance. So that's my rant there. But I want to be clear that I'm not going to excuse any police officer killing someone who is unarmed, especially someone sitting in their apartment like Botham Jean. So her being distracted, she was distracted by sexting her man, talking about getting some booty. I mean, let's not be crazy here. That's what distracted her. All right. So Officer Rivera, a lot of time, very salacious talk, text messages that were that the prosecution didn't even want to read in open court. So who knows what they said or could have said. But again, let's see. Have I covered everything? So we had 3 witnesses. Now I'm going back through to make sure I've got all the meat and potatoes. Okay, so a couple of points I know I've missed. The defense noted that 92 people who they interviewed that lived in the Southside Flats apartment, that they had also gone to the wrong floor before. So 92 people. I don't know how many residents lived there, but so that was part of their point that, hey, it could happen to anybody. Now, obviously, the question is, well, how many of those 92 people got into an altercation with someone on the wrong floor when they went to their house? There's also the point they make about the sorry about that. There's also the point they make about the standard operating procedures and what to do and what side she was on when she entered the home. I've already addressed that she clearly is not a victim in this case. Let's see. Judge Kemp, right at the end, further admonished DA Cruzo and advised the prosecutors to remind their boss to please remember that the gag order applies to him. I'm just kind of spitballing here, going through, make sure I haven't missed everything. Okay, so, all right, thanks, James. I'm glad you agreed. All right, so James brings up an interesting point here, so of whether or not and what she'll be convicted of. And I don't know that you can. That's a whole lot of speculation right now. We don't know. I mean, I'd have to ask you, if you were a juror, how would you rule it? I mean, in your mind, because that's what it comes down to. All this talk about, what we think, and even what the story that the prosecution and the defense presents, I really believe that it comes down to how reasonable is a jury. How reasonable is the jury to understand that if you shoot someone who offering you no harm or threat at the time, that is murder. There's a lot of people in the heat of passion that do silly things and kill people. I'm not making a straight-on apples to apples comparison here, but how many battered women have gone to jail for murder when they shot their abuser, and in the moment they shot their abuser, they weren't being abused. It was cumulative. It was, they snapped or whatever. There's plenty of stories about that, right? But those aren't trained officers, and that's not what happened here. And when those people when those women are shoot and kill their husbands or abusers, a lot of them are convicted of murder. So I think this whole manslaughter, like, we have to give her some level of deference because she's a police officer. That's ridiculous. We need to hold her to a higher standard. Again, if she was black, the same thing needs to happen because we're talking about an institution. This is systemic, okay? Police shooting unarmed black people. All right. I don't know that you have to really prove premeditation lasts for 20 or 30 minutes. Let's say she was angry, James. Let's say she was angry after talking to her boyfriend and went and was frustrated, and in that moment said, "You know what?" She was a little hyped up and didn't say anything. She didn't make a conscious decision, but I don't know that matters, though. That you have to make a fully conscious decision to murder someone. Premeditation, as far as I know, and I'm no attorney, can happen very, very quickly. But I'm going to get a legal expert on here to kind of get into that more. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the case or any kind of comments. I believe I've covered most of today, as far as I saw and can remember. There was, I don't think the defense was super strong, if I'm being honest. I think that they are speaking in a tone that presupposes that the jury is intelligent and reasonable, which I hope they are. But a lot of times in these cases, we get mad at the state and the prosecutor, but really the burden is on the jury to make the right decision. Juries hold a lot of power. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the term jury nullification, where a jury, let's say in a drug case, can decide to not convict a person. Let's say it's a marijuana-related case in a state like Texas, like this one, where it's still illegal. Juries have power to make certain decisions. Now, I'm not saying convict a person who does not need to be convicted of murder, but I am saying consider the facts and don't fall for the okie doke. Don't give undue sympathy when it doesn't belong. Remember who the victim is here. When Amber Guyger murdered Botham Jean, she did not offer aid, anything that I know or heard of, other than to say, "I'm sorry, buddy." She said over 22 times, according to the defense, that she walked into the wrong apartment. Over 22 times she said that. But what does that mean? She getting her story right? Shouldn't she be rendering aid? That reminds me of another point that the prosecution made when speaking to Rivera, her partner. Asked him, if you were to encounter a burglary suspect with your training and you were to arrive on a scene, what would you do? Obviously, he would take cover. He would radio for backup. He would, take evasive action. I'm not a police officer, so there's a lot of things I'm probably leaving out there. But there's things that you would do in that case. So basically, the defense can't have it both ways. You can't say that she was encountering an intruder in a cop capacity in that moment and then say that she's absolved of everything because she was a cop. Because calling him an intruder, Botham Jean an intruder, is factually incorrect. He's sitting in his house, on his couch, smoking some weed, watching football, eating some ice cream, which he told his sister earlier that he was planning to do. My man was a regular guy. He was looking forward to his birthday. He was looking forward to going to a Drake concert. Just a regular 26-year-old man in his apartment. And there's really, I'm biased, but luckily on my show I can be biased, and I'm not on the jury. So I can, we can just kind of do what we do here. But let me see if any more questions or comments. I appreciate you guys listening to me now. I think I've covered as much as I have right now. I had more to talk about. There's like other cases going on. I want to talk about reparations, and I plan to do a full-fledged show nightly, or at least a 4 times weekly. But I will definitely keep you guys updated on the case. I'll be watching. Just to kind of recap for folks who may just be joining, just kind of going over the case from soup to nuts today. I think my mic's getting a little hot, sorry. Kind of go over the case from soup to nuts, the opening statements. One thing that was interesting at the beginning of the case, of the trial, I should say today, there was a lot of pretrial motions this morning, a motion for dismissal, motions of whether or not they were going to allow the text messages and phone calls and web searches to be entered into play. When that happened, I mentioned that a reporter's laptop went off playing music, went off twice. The judge took it. As she took it, before she went back to her chambers, she very, I would say angrily, almost angrily, told the audience, and I assume who's ever manning the door, the bailiffs, to let the public in. This is the people's court, right? So I want to give Judge Kemp some credit for how she handled today. Despite her endorsement by the Dallas Police Association prior to her being recently elected, and you know that the Dallas Police Association is and has, at least has paid Guyger's legal fees. I don't know if they currently are. All right, I think I have covered as much as I can cover. I want to go back over Officer Rivera real quick just to remind everyone that he did also shoot and kill an unarmed black man back in 2004. That was a partner. They became more than partners. So I think that's important to remember, just based on the company you keep. And, again, the police are shooting way too many people. And so that was a bombshell that uh-oh. Look at this. I got to fix something on the fly again. That was a bombshell that I wasn't ready for. But let's see. What else do we have? I think that is it. So now that I've wound down about 2 or 3 times, unless you guys have any questions for me. Oh, yeah. So this is from the news story about her partner, who I think didn't do tons to help her. So let me give my opinion on that. I don't think that the 2 witnesses that would, the police witnesses, Sergeant Watson and Officer Rivera, did a whole lot to help Amber Guyger today, because that they didn't do a lot to hurt her, but they didn't do a lot to help her, because if we're talking about procedures and facts and what they would have done and how you handle when you shoot someone and when you arrive at a burglary scene, I think they both were very clear about what actions they would take. Okay, so with that being said, I think I'm done for the night before I go in a complete circle. If you have any questions, holla at your boy. You make sure you check me out. I will be live, I guess, Facebooking throughout the duration of the case. The jury has been sequestered. Yeah, and again, sorry about it if you see my arms being cut off. I got to work on some of my background setup. But, yeah, so follow me. I'll see you guys again tomorrow night. I'll be a little more succinct tomorrow. And if you have, I don't know, I guess that's it. So we'll talk to you later. Peace.